The year was 73 AD, and the bustling markets of Rome echoed with the voices of merchants hawking their human cargo. But among the countless souls sold into bondage that scorching summer day, few could have imagined the depths of degradation that awaited them behind the marble facades of patrician villas. What transpired within those walls was not merely slavery, as we might understand it from textbooks, but a systematic destruction of human dignity that would make even hardened centurions turn away in disgust. Today, we strip away the sanitized myths of Roman grandeur to expose the unflinching reality of what powerful Roman masters truly did to their female slaves. The evidence preserved in ancient documents, archaeological findings, and the testimonies of those who witnessed these horrors paints a picture so disturbing that historians have often chosen to bury it rather than confront its implications. The Roman Empire, for all its architectural marvels and legal innovations, was built upon the systematic exploitation of human beings on a scale that dwarfs most modern understanding. But it was the treatment of female slaves that revealed the true depths of Roman cruelty, a carefully orchestrated theater of domination designed not just to extract labor, but to obliterate the very essence of womanhood itself. Ancient Rome in the 1st and 2nd centuries AD was a civilization intoxicated by power and conquest. The endless military campaigns brought a constant stream of captives from across the known world, and Roman society had developed elaborate systems for categorizing, processing, and exploiting these human resources. Female slaves occupied a uniquely vulnerable position in this hierarchy, subject not only to the brutal labor demands placed upon all slaves, but to additional forms of exploitation that were considered not just acceptable, but fundamental to Roman domestic life. The slave markets of Rome were themselves spectacles of methodical dehumanization. Women and girls were stripped naked, examined like livestock, and subjected to invasive inspections that determined their eventual fate. Those deemed attractive were earmarked for domestic service in wealthy households, while others faced the mines, the fields, or the workshops where life expectancy was measured in months rather than years. But it was those selected for household service who often faced the most insidious forms of suffering, trapped within the private domains of masters who wielded absolute power over their bodies and souls. The legal framework surrounding female slaves in Rome was designed to ensure their complete powerlessness. Under Roman law, slaves were considered property rather than people, with no rights to refuse any demand made by their owners. This legal structure created an environment where the most heinous acts could be committed without consequence, protected by a system that viewed the suffering of slaves as irrelevant to the functioning of civilized society. Marcus Crassus, one of Rome's wealthiest citizens, was known to maintain over 500 female slaves in his various properties across the empire. Contemporary accounts describe a household where these women were subjected to elaborate systems of control that went far beyond simple labor extraction. They were branded with hot irons to mark their ownership, forced to wear distinctive clothing that advertised their status, and subjected to daily inspections that violated every aspect of their privacy and dignity. The daily routine for female slaves in wealthy Roman households began before dawn and extended well into the night. They were responsible for every aspect of domestic life, from the most menial cleaning tasks to the intimate personal care of their masters and mistresses. But it was the additional duties imposed upon them that revealed the true nature of Roman attitudes toward enslaved women. Many were forced to serve as concubines, available to satisfy the sexual desires of not only their owners, but also male guests, business associates, and even the adolescent sons of the household. The breeding programs implemented by Roman slave owners represent perhaps the most calculating aspect of this system of exploitation. Female slaves were treated as livestock, forced into sexual relationships designed to produce the next generation of human property. Children born to slave mothers automatically became slaves themselves, creating a self-perpetuating cycle of bondage that could span generations. These women had no say in their reproductive choices, no ability to protect their children, and no hope that their offspring might escape the fate that had befallen them. Archaeological evidence from Pompeii and other Roman sites reveals the physical conditions endured by female slaves in even the wealthiest households. Sleeping quarters were little more than closets, often windowless and barely large enough for a single person to lie down. The lack of privacy was absolute, with slaves subject to constant surveillance and unable to form meaningful relationships or maintain any semblance of personal autonomy. The psychological torment inflicted upon female slaves was as systematic as the physical abuse. Roman masters understood that breaking the spirit was as important as controlling the body, and they employed sophisticated methods of mental domination. Slaves were forced to witness the punishment of others, creating an atmosphere of constant fear and uncertainty. They were given false hopes of freedom that were then cruelly withdrawn, and subjected to arbitrary rules that changed without notice, making it impossible to predict what might trigger punishment. Punishments for female slaves who displeased their masters were designed to maximize both pain and humiliation. Flogging was common, but Roman creativity in inflicting suffering went far beyond simple beatings. Women could be forced to wear heavy chains for weeks at a time, branded repeatedly as reminders of their status, or subjected to sexual assaults that were considered legitimate expressions of owner authority rather than crimes. The medical care provided to female slaves reveals another dimension of their exploitation. While valuable slaves might receive some treatment when injured or ill, this care was motivated entirely by economic considerations rather than humanitarian concerns. Female slaves were often used as test subjects for medical procedures, subjected to experimental treatments that caused additional suffering in the name of advancing Roman medical knowledge. The social isolation imposed upon female slaves was complete and intentional. They were forbidden from forming lasting relationships, separated from family members sold to other households, and prevented from practicing their native religions or maintaining cultural connections to their homeland. This systematic erasure of identity was designed to create individuals who existed solely to serve their masters, with no independent thoughts, desires, or aspirations. The scale of this exploitation was staggering. Historians estimate that at the height of the Roman Empire, female slaves numbered in the millions spread across thousands of households from Britain to Egypt. Each represented not just an individual tragedy, but part of a vast system of human suffering that formed the foundation of Roman prosperity and leisure. The economic value placed upon female slaves fluctuated based on factors that reduced human beings to mere commodities. Age, appearance, skills, and perceived docility all influenced price, with the most expensive slaves often facing the most intensive forms of exploitation. The slave markets maintained detailed records of these transactions, documenting the systematic trade in human misery with the same precision applied to grain shipments or pottery sales. Contemporary Roman writers occasionally acknowledged the brutality of slave treatment, but almost always in the context of warning against excess rather than questioning the fundamental morality of the institution. Seneca advised moderation in punishing slaves, not from humanitarian concern, but because excessive cruelty might reduce their economic value or provoke rebellion. The resistance shown by female slaves, despite the overwhelming odds against them, provides glimpses of the human spirit that Roman oppression could never fully extinguish. Some attempted escape, despite knowing that recapture meant torture and death. Others found subtle ways to sabotage their masters' interests, poisoning food or damaging valuable property when opportunities arose. The religious and spiritual dimensions of female slave experiences remain largely hidden in historical records, but archaeological evidence suggests that many maintained secret practices and beliefs despite severe prohibitions. Hidden shrines and religious artifacts found in slave quarters indicate that even under the most oppressive conditions, these women sought connection to something beyond their immediate suffering. The testimonies of freed slaves, though rare and often filtered through the perspectives of their former oppressors, provide haunting glimpses into the psychological aftermath of these experiences. Women who had managed to purchase or earn their freedom carried invisible scars that shaped every aspect of their remaining lives. Many struggled to form trusting relationships, their capacity for intimacy shattered by years of systematic violation. Others displayed what modern psychologists would recognize as severe trauma responses, unable to sleep in enclosed spaces or experiencing panic attacks when approached by men in positions of authority. The Roman legal system provided elaborate procedures for the manumission of slaves, but these processes were designed to benefit masters rather than slaves themselves. Female slaves could theoretically earn their freedom through exceptional service or by accumulating enough money to purchase their liberty, but the practical barriers were almost insurmountable. Masters could arbitrarily increase the price of freedom, extend the terms of service, or simply refuse to honor previous agreements with no legal recourse available to the slave. The documentation of slave inventories from wealthy Roman estates reveals the cold, calculating manner in which human beings were catalogued alongside furniture and livestock. Female slaves were listed with detailed descriptions that reduced them to their most exploitable characteristics. These records, preserved in ancient archives, contain entries that describe women by their physical attributes, sexual experience, and breeding potential with the same clinical detachment used for describing farm animals. The training methods employed to prepare female slaves for household service involved systematic processes of dehumanization that began the moment they entered Roman territory. New slaves underwent intensive indoctrination designed to strip away their previous identities and reshape them into compliant servants. They were forced to abandon their native names, adopt Roman customs, and speak only Latin regardless of their linguistic background. Those who resisted faced escalating punishments until their will was broken completely. The social hierarchy within slave populations created additional layers of exploitation and suffering. Female slaves were often pitted against each other in competitions for slightly better treatment or reduced workloads, creating divisions that prevented unified resistance. Masters deliberately fostered these rivalries, understanding that isolated individuals were easier to control than groups that might develop solidarity and mutual support. The sexual exploitation of female slaves extended beyond the immediate household to encompass a broader network of Roman social relationships. Masters frequently loaned or gifted female slaves to business associates, political allies, or family members as expressions of hospitality or tokens of favor. These women had no voice in these arrangements and were expected to provide whatever services were demanded by their temporary masters with the same submissive compliance required in their home environment. The role of female slaves in Roman religious ceremonies reveals another dimension of their exploitation. Many were forced to participate in rituals that violated their personal beliefs or subjected them to public humiliation. Some ceremonies required slaves to perform degrading acts before assembled crowds, transforming religious observance into spectacles of domination that reinforced social hierarchies while traumatizing the participants. The economic calculations behind slave treatment demonstrate the purely mercenary motivations driving Roman behavior. Masters maintained detailed cost-benefit analyses that weighed the expense of feeding and housing slaves against their productive output. Female slaves who became pregnant faced particularly cruel mathematics, as masters calculated whether the potential value of offspring justified the reduced labor capacity during pregnancy and recovery. The medical practices inflicted upon female slaves included forced sterilization procedures for those deemed unsuitable for breeding, experimental surgeries conducted without anesthesia, and deliberate infection with diseases to study their progression. Roman physicians viewed slave bodies as expendable resources for advancing medical knowledge, conducting procedures that would never be attempted on free citizens. The geographic distribution of female slaves across the empire created networks of suffering that spanned continents. Women captured in Germanic tribes found themselves serving in Egyptian villas, while British slaves were transported to Syrian households thousands of miles from their birthplaces. This deliberate dispersal prevented the maintenance of cultural connections and ensured that slaves remained isolated from any familiar support systems. The documentation of slave revolts reveals the desperation that occasionally overcame even the most carefully maintained systems of control. Female slaves participated in several major uprisings, often serving as intelligence gatherers or supply organizers due to their access to household information and resources. The brutal suppression of these revolts involved mass crucifixions and tortures specifically designed to terrorize other slaves into permanent submission. The marble columns of Rome still stand today, monuments to an empire that history has chosen to remember for its roads and aqueducts, rather than the countless women who suffered in silence behind villa walls. Yet beneath the polished veneer of classical civilization lay a machinery of human destruction so thorough that its victims were erased not just from life but from memory itself. These forgotten souls, reduced to inventory items and breeding stock, remind us that the price of empire is always paid in human suffering. Their stories, buried for centuries beneath romantic notions of Roman grandeur, demand to be heard as testimonies to both the depths of human cruelty and the enduring strength of the human spirit that no amount of oppression could ever fully extinguish.